You know, if I'm being honest, I do understand why RWBY criticism has become so popular on YouTube in the past couple years. I mean, shit, I made a criticism video myself a couple years back, so, you know, I'm not much one to judge. At the same time, though, I can't help but be frustrated by this whole thing. Like, I look back at that video I made and I just think, oh my god, I contributed to this. What the hell was I thinking? Because, you know, looking at it as a whole, I feel like the whole RWBY criticism scene lacks a certain perspective on where we've been and, you know, where we're going and how far we've come. Because, while I do understand why RWBY criticism has, you know, become so popular, it's less to do with the quality of the show itself and more to do with the way that this fandom processes it, you know, the way we relate to it and understand it. And I feel like that's something that even a lot of fans of the show don't completely understand. Because, you know, lest we forget, RWBY did not really start out as a full show. It was this, you know, this weird independent thing that these guys from that company that made the silly Halo videos were pulling together. And, you know, on those terms, it didn't really have to be good. I mean, sure, you could still enjoy it, you know, I did, but if we were judging it as a actual show back then, like a full-fledged production, it never would have survived. Like, it's very clear looking back on it now that the early seasons of RWBY are just not fully formed. You know, they're still the product of a team figuring out how to pull together this project, you know, with this technology that they're figuring out from the ground up. But, you know, it was okay at the time because it didn't need to be a show, it didn't need to be that good, it just needed to be, you know, this cool thing that people on the internet did, and it was just cool to see it happen. So, you know, even if the animation wasn't the best, or the writing and voice acting were still, you know, subpar, it was, you know, totally fine to just look at it and say, you know, it's a cool thing, you know, it's a cool thing, it gave me a cool time, and I'm totally fine with that. And, you know, that's all it needed to be. But of course, as time goes on, the production starts getting better, and more importantly, I think, the story starts getting better, and our understanding of the story starts becoming more complete. Like, it becomes more clear to us that this isn't just a weird internet fun side project. Like, there's an actual plan going into it, you know, that the people behind it have, you know, a strategy and a goal that they're trying to reach, and they're trying to make this, you know, more than just a little thing, you know, they want it to be something big. And then, of course, all of that comes together in the Volume 3 finale, which is just this huge status quo reshaping thing that completely redefines both the show and the way that we look at the show, because it proved to us that we could actually care about this thing. Like, we could care about these characters, we could be legitimately upset when they got hurt, and we could be legitimately invested in their struggles. You know, it was the point, I think, where RWBY became a real show, and where the fandom started treating it more as one. Because we saw then that the game plan was in place, and, you know, this was a big thing, you know, this wasn't just a little side project anymore, this was a full-scale journey, this was an adventure that the team was going to take us on. And, you know, that was really cool to see it, you know, transition from this little thing that could into this massive thing. But therein lies the problem, too. Because, you know, once it becomes acceptable to think of RWBY as a real show and to hold it up to that standard, it becomes acceptable to criticize it as a real show too, because now you have expectations for it, which means that now all those little and not so little flaws that you were overlooking in the past, you can't overlook anymore, because now it's not acceptable to just toss them aside as, you know, the result of an amateur team pulling something cool together regardless. It's, you know, it's a real thing, and you're judging it as such, so you start noticing those more, you start noticing the flaws more than you ever did before. And, you know, all that is compounded by RWBY itself at this time just undergoing this complete evolution in what it is and how it's made. Like, Volume 4 is like the first season without any of Monty's influence. You know, Miles and Carrie have to start figuring out where they want to go and how they want to develop it now that the show's creator is no longer involved. And, you know, the entire genre shifts, you know, it's no longer this action, magical school thing, it's, you know, this fantasy adventure where you're exploring all across the world, and, you know, that requires different techniques, different pacing, different, you know, stuff like that. And then, of course, the whole animation engine gets completely upgraded, and they have to figure out how to work with that whole new technology again. So, you know, all things considered, it's almost like the show is completely reinventing itself right at the exact same time that everybody has started taking it seriously. So, you know, taking all that into account, it is not really surprising why so much RWBY criticism has popped up, you know, in the years following Volume 3. You if anything, it's almost surprising there isn't more, But this is where my story comes into the picture, because I didn't start watching RWBY when it first started airing. I started watching in the gap after Volume 4, before Volume 5. I binged through the whole thing in, about a week, I'd say. And so I got to have the experience of basically watching the show evolve in time-lapse format in front of me. As opposed to sticking with it and watching it evolve in real time, I got to see, this perfect snapshot all at the same time of where RWBY started from, where it went from there, and where it ended up by the end of Volume 4. And I think that perspective is sort of what makes me frustrated at RWBY criticism that's just oh, it's going downhill, it's not the same ever since Monty, all that stuff. Because I saw this show get better all at once. I saw it develop from those early unfocused days into, the legitimate thing that it is now. And because of all that, I see Volume 1 and Volume 4 side by side, and the point is, if you think the new volumes are worse than what came before, you are out of your goddamn mind. And it's not like I necessarily disagree with all the common points raised in RWBY criticism, over and over. I disagree with some of them, not all of them. But I think my point is, seeing the show from that big a perspective, it has never been perfect. And I feel like a lot of the criticism I see kind of ignores that. They treat the first 3 volumes as this sacrosanct, perfect text that has only been sullied as time goes on. And, all I gotta say is, if you legitimately think that RWBY post-Volume 4 is the worst it's ever been, I can refute that point in 2 words. Carden Winchester. Just saying. I guess it also frustrates me because, Volume 5 appears to be the place where, a lot of the anger really started to boil over, and you really start to see so many people, getting involved with writing, takedown videos of, oh my god, RWBY sucks now. And what frustrates me about that is that Volume 5 was legitimately one of my favorite volumes at that point. It definitely has flaws. The final battle is definitely a mess, but it was the first volume that I watched as it was airing, and with the backing of everything that I, binged through before, it was what gave me the confidence that this show was lasting. In spite of the flaws that it still carried with it and was still working to work through and erase, there was a legitimate core here. There was a story worth telling, and it was a story that I could be invested in. And then, they just one-up themselves again with Volume 6, which is indisputably the best the show has ever been, and I could not be more happy that I got to see it in real time. And, that doesn't mean don't criticize it if you don't want to. I mean, again, I made a criticism video myself, so I can't tell you not to. At the same time, though, I can't help but be exhausted by just how much of it I see, and just how little of it seems to be actively helpful. I'm not going to tell you not to hate watch, because I've hate watched plenty of things. There is value in watching things you dislike, but I wonder how much value there is in just continuing to stick with this show if you're not enjoying it anymore, or continuing to just try to pinpoint all the flaws you possibly can, as opposed to appreciating just how far we've come. Because that's what I feel like we don't appreciate, even some of the fans. We have come so goddamn far with this show. It started out as this passion project with a small team, from a group of people who had never really worked with this stuff before, who were figuring it out on the fly, and now it's this massive story and this massive franchise juggernaut. It is one of the defining, animated properties of the current geek space. And we built that from the ground up, Monty and Miles and Carrie and this entire fan base. We made this. And the way I see it, it is only getting better as it goes. And I want to see more of that. I want to see more understanding of, this is really impressive what we've done. And if we're just trying to look at all the lingering flaws that are still being scrubbed out, then I feel like it's entirely missing the point, and I feel like it's doing a disservice to pretty much everything that's brought us here. Because here's the thing, you can make whatever criticism you want of the most recent volumes, I can agree with it or disagree with it as I want, but I will always be able to reference something in the early parts of the show that is so much worse than whatever you come up with. To everybody who's now complaining about Adam and saying he had wasted potential, which I disagree with, would you rather have, Cinder from volumes 2 and 3 doing that god-awful, FMA Lust impression that just made none of her scenes possible to take seriously? Think of how much better a villain she's become when she started to develop more nuances and be able to show more emotions than just, oh, I'm sultry, I'm the sexy, mysterious one. What was that accent? Holy shit. And I could keep going with that. You're not fond of how Bumblebee was handled for whatever reason. At least it was better than, trying to shove Weiss and Neptune together for no adequate reason back in Season 2. Whatever problems you might have with the character arcs in most recent seasons, I will reply by pointing you to the end of Volume 1, where Weiss is randomly racist for like one episode and then it's never brought up again. I know a lot of people don't really like Jean in the most recent seasons. They think he's too angsty and brooding. Possibly, but I think that's infinitely better than the dumbass, bumbling, idiot that we got in some of the early parts. And again, I agree that the Volume 5 climax was definitely underwhelming, but I thought the same of the Volume 2 climax, because, it basically solved no emotional stakes for anyone involved. It had almost no closure, and the main characters didn't even do anything. It was all solved by this almost previously unmentioned team that showed up out of nowhere, and I think we all just didn't register at the time because the fights were, still really kick-ass back then. But, really, go back, look at that Volume 2 fight. Nobody undergoes any significant changes except for Blake, because Blake is the one part of the show that has always been fucking amazing. At the same time, though, I don't want to do too much of that. Like, I already said my piece about, the first couple volumes in the video I made, and I feel like that sort of stuff just isn't helpful anymore. I want to focus more on the positives, the stuff I love, the ways that I see this show is just getting better and better, and especially the most recent volume, which I think is the best proof yet of just how far RWBY's come, because it feels so complete. Like, there was almost none of the awkwardness, or the weird pacing, or weird characterization, or weird dialogue that we saw in some of the earlier volumes. It is just so rock-solid a foundation that I think I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I legitimately can't, because it's doing really well, and I want to celebrate more of what it does well than, lingering on the stuff that it didn't do well, that it has since improved upon. So in honor of that, I want to, spend this last part of my video to just praise and highlight a lot of things that I loved about Volume 6, in no particular order, because I think they're all things that are worth celebrating. The action is back up to par after the post-Monty slump. Like, there's so much weight and momentum in every single action. It's great. It's kicking ass again. I love the pacing. The pacing is superb. Every scene feels like it has a purpose. Every moment feels like it is forwarding something important, and I was constantly engaged all throughout. The bees. I love the bees. We got the best character arc for RWBY yet. The first part where she felt like an actual protagonist. And the climax is with that, freaking amazing moment in the finale where Indomitable starts playing, and it's just, you see Summer Rose for the first time, and it's, oh, perfect moment. Crow gets a really great arc, too. He gets to be more than the fun drunkle, he gets actual pathos, and he gets to evolve and develop, and I think that's great, too. Maria Calavera, just in general, awesome. Bees. Cinematography. The team did a really great job capturing, the beauty and the grandeur of all the locations we visit, which is, a real plus for the kind of adventure story that RWBY's become. Cute boy Oz! Adam Torres gets a fantastic end. He's always been my favorite villain in the show just because of how well-established a dick he is, and I think the way they sent him off was just perfect. Casual gay representation. That's a plus. We get more fleshing out for Emerald and Mercury, like they're starting to feel like real characters again for the first time in a while. Bees. The moment with the Pyrrha statue made me care more about Arcos in that moment than I did throughout the entirety of the time that Pyrrha was actually alive, so... The soundtrack. I love all the songs in the Volume 6 soundtrack. I think they're all really great and, among the best that RWBY's done so far. We get the backstory. We get to find out the lore and the magic of this world and how the moon was destroyed, and it creates such a powerful moment where Oz gets to be this flawed character and Salem gets to be this legitimately intimidating villain, and the world feels so big and awesome now. Dolores Umbridge as a midget general. That is all. You get moments of genuine dread and atmosphere on the Brunswick farms. Like, this show did actual good horror better than a lot of other animated shows I've seen. Neo's back, and she's still awesome. Bees. More bees. All the bees. Every single bee. Just all the bees. You know, I wasn't even really that invested in Bumblebee to begin with, and now it's one of my top 10 ships ever. They got me good. And it's that kind of stuff that I want to see more celebration of going forward, and more appreciation of. Because we've come a long way from, you know, those early days of janky animation and awkward writing and, you know, everything about jaundice back in Season 1. You know, I think RWBY is legitimately great now, and I think it is only getting better as it goes and as it becomes more confident in itself. And personally, I can't wait to see where it goes. And if you still want to criticize, you know, criticize. I obviously can't stop you, but I hope you can at least see just what a momentous thing it is that this show has gotten as far as it has, and has stayed, you know, as good as it has, and has only gotten better as it's gone. Because, frankly, I think that's something really worth celebrating. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for sticking with me through this. Check out my channel if you so wish. I don't have any, like, stable series of content or consistent schedule. I just post whatever I feel like when I feel like. But, yeah, thanks all for watching, and I guess I will see you next time. RWBY's great.